Let's take a look at this paired passage, which is also a history passage. So you get two benefits in one. Usually paired passages, as you know, are going to have two passages which are kind of like in contrast to each other. All right. And each of these passages is going to have only one underlying concept or idea that the author is going to put forward and they want to convince you. So always look out for that one idea the author always wants to tell you in each of these paired passages. All right, so let's get started reading the passage here. This is passage 1. Let's start with that. It's adapted from Edmund Burke, Reflections on the Revolution in France. So this is just after the French Revolution because it's published in 1790. All right, and then the second passage is by some other guy, Thomas Paine. You might have heard of him. This was just after 1790. In 1791. So you can see the mode of thought, right? In 1790s, people were actually thinking about this. What are they thinking about? Let's talk about it. But in our mind, we're going to remember it's about some kind of has to do something with the French Revolution. Okay. These two guys are probably, because they're writing in English, they're probably from England or maybe the US, all right, most probably from the UK if you know who these guys exactly are. So passage 1, right, to avoid the evils of inconstancy and versatility, 10,000 times worse than those of obstinacy and the blindest prejudice, we have consecrated the state, all right. This part itself means that we have made the state, which we don't know what it is yet, we have made it sacred. Okay, it's kind of like untouched, that no man should approach to look into its defects or corruptions, but with due caution he should never dream of beginning its reformation by its subversion. Okay, a mouthful of words, but all they're saying is there's the state here, which as you can feel now is the government, or in some kind of the general situation at that point in time, and you shouldn't kind of break it down. He should approach to the faults of the state as to the wounds of a father. So there are some faults in the state here, and then he should approach it like a wounds of a father. Why? Because the state is kind of like an older situation, right? It's been there for a while, but it's got its own faults. Okay, with pious awe and trembling solicitude, whatever. By this wild prejudice, we are taught to look with horror on those children of their country who were prompt rashly to hack that aged parent in pieces. Those are some really strong words. What they're saying is they're kind of like taking the state and comparing it to a parent. So you care for a parent, right, as they age, right? So the state has some faults. It's gotten a little bit mature, but you need to care for it. Okay, that's all this is saying. And put him into the kettle of magicians, whatever, in hopes that by their poisonous weeds and wild incantations they may, this is important, the last piece of any part of a paragraph is important, they may regenerate the paternal constitution and renovate their father's life. So what they want to do to the state or the government or the situation at that point in time is they want to change it, some people want to change it, and this guy is saying you shouldn't do it. All right, that's all this paragraph is saying. Such a long paragraph. Its summary is just that don't break the state just the way you wouldn't hurt your parents. That's it. All right, let's move to the next paragraph. Again, now we've got the main idea that there's a state and don't break it. Let's see what else, with that in the back of our mind, let's try to understand what else he talks about. Okay, again, it's going to be supporting that particular point. So society is in need of contract, whatever, subordinate contracts, right? Subordinate contracts, which means contracts which are not as important, okay? For objects of mere occasional interest may be dissolved at pleasure. So there's a contract, right? You say, let's say you rent a house, and that's a contract, and you can dissolve it after you're right. Like the lease, right? It's over, or even before that, you can get rid of the lease. But here he's saying that's an example, right? But the state would not be considered, right, as nothing better than a partnership agreement in a trade. So he's saying there are these various partnerships like mortgage, or there's trading going on, right? Like one country buys from the other, one person buys from the other, but the state is above them. Okay, the state does contract between the various people in the state, right? The various contracts we have, like the police, like the judicial system, all of these ideas in the 1790s, that's way above all of the other contracts. These can be broken, but you shouldn't break this, right? One thing to think about, maybe this guy is a rich dude, right? Like, and he doesn't want his own property to be attacked, right? There's always this internal motive of the person, right? So let's also think about it from that point of view, all right? Or other such low concern to be taken up for little temporary interest and to be dissolved by the fancy of the parties. Okay, by the fancy of the parties, I mean the people who are party to it, right? It is to be looked on with other reverence. So again, the same idea, right? It's consecrated, consecrated. It's more reverent, right? This is like 1700s language, because it is not a partnership in things subservient only to the gross animal existence of a temporary and perishable nature, right? He's saying that like trading or right, leasing a house, it's kind of temporary, right? You do it and then you can move on, but this is like for the good of everybody, right? And why is it not as, why is it like the most important or one of the most important things, right? It's a partnership in all science, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue, and in all perfection. I wouldn't believe this, but whatever he's want to say, he's trying to say, let him say it, right? It's like a politician trying to give a speech, right? So some parts you need to just skim through it. If I were to read the passage during the test, I would just skim through this part. Okay, the most important part over here, though, is that the state is a contract between various people, right? And it shouldn't be broken the same way how some other contracts are broken. Okay. Finally, over here, he says, as the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those, so this is a slightly new idea starting from here, between those who are living and between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. So it's not only the present, right? Not only the present, the past, and the future. So everything, it's, even though you're here in this slice in time, there's this past and the future which are important in the existence, for the existence of this, or at least who are concerned with the existence of the state. Okay, the municipal corporations of that universal kingdom, okay, of this whole kingdom of these people, are not morally at liberty, which means cannot. That's all they're saying. At their pleasure, cannot at their pleasure, right? Or their speculations of a contingent improvement, which means just because they feel they want to do it, or just because they think maybe it could improve a little bit, right? Conditional improvement, contingent improvement, to separate and tear the bands of their subordinate community, or to dissolve it, right? So what they're saying is the people in this present time, they don't have, or they shouldn't really break the state. They should just let it be, because they are part, because the state is kind of like a complete system which encompasses the past, the present, and the future. And especially, it's kind of like the tradition in the past and the care for the future, right? So the present really doesn't, is just right here, right now. It's just a single player in this whole big kingdom, okay? And they don't have the right, you can say, to separate and tear this state, right? And dissolve it into this unsocial, uncivil, unconnected. You can see this alliteration going on, totally like a politician talk, or like a rhetoric kind of talk, right? That kind of like hypnotizes the audience in some way. Chaos of elementary principles. So don't, he's saying his summary is don't break it. So once again, let's summarize this real quick. He starts here by saying that you have to consider the state, which is the government or the situation, like a political thing, right? Which is at that time, maybe it could be the kingdom as well, right? You should hold it. You shouldn't change it. No man should look into its defects, right? But you can look at it just a little bit, but you shouldn't think about changing it fully. You shouldn't break it, right? Let it be the way it is. Okay, why is that? And then he gives an example of the parent. Why is that? Because the state, according to him, right, you may not believe it, the state is a better, like, it's a contract, it's like a relationship between people, which is better than the trade relationships that we have, the commercial, money-minded relations that we have in our life. Okay, why is that? He gives some reason. It's a partnership in science, art, etc., whatever. And the final thing he says is that we are just a slice in time. Even though we feel we are the most up-to-date people, they're having people in the past and the future. who are also affected by this. Okay, the past is the tradition, right? We shouldn't destroy the tradition and the future. Like, we care for them, right? If we do something now, maybe it'll affect the future. Okay, I know I've taken a long time to explain it, but you can read it much faster, and this is what should go in your mind as you read the passage. Again, reading these passages, it should probably take you something like this passage. Maybe it could even take you 10 minutes, okay, at the start. But eventually you should gain enough practice that you should be able to read it in 10 minutes. The whole two passages. So this passage, maybe you should be taking the half time, right? So 5 minutes to read this one passage. Eventually, your goal would be to read it and summarize in your mind. You don't need to read anything, write anything. You can underline stuff that's going on, but in your mind, you should be able to draw these kind of charts. Okay, the state is above, the past, present, etc. Okay, now let's move on to passage number 2. Again, let's read what is passage number 2 over here. It's adapted from Thomas Paine, right? Very popular author, the author of Common Sense, right? Rights of Man, okay? Again, 1791. So here he's talking. Clearly, in our mind, we have a certain bias, at least I have a bias, that this passage is going to be either really talking very close, very similar to what the first guy said, what Mr. Burke said, or it's going to be totally in contrast or in opposition to what he's saying. So let's see what he's saying. Okay, and usually the first two lines or sentences will give you an idea. So every age and generation must be as free to act for itself in all cases as the ages and generations which preceded it. Right? So here you go. They should be free. While this guy said they shouldn't. Right? Over here he's saying right, it cannot be. It's a partnership. Right? It's not only between those who are living. Right? So there's some contrast here. Right, all of these which preceded it. Maybe this guy wrote it in 1791, and the 1790 passage, maybe he read it. Right, there's not like a ton of passages that were published during those times. Maybe he read it, and it's maybe he's even alluding to it a little bit. All right, so anyway, this was over here. The vanity and presumption of governing beyond the grave means people who have died, right? The grave means the people who have died, is the most ridiculous and insolent of all tyrannies. Whatever. This is just too much language. What they're saying is also this, like, all in 21st century language, this means people, like, if you think that somebody should govern beyond the grave, that's ridiculous. That's all he's saying, right? So he's saying over here, you're living in this age right now, you are free to act irrespective of what has happened in the past, which means tradition, or what should be in the future. You just think about yourself right now first, okay? Man has no property in man. Okay, he cannot own man. Okay, this is 1790s and he's saying it. Okay, neither has any generation a property in the generations which are to follow. The whatever, it's the same idea. The parliament or people of 1688. So this, remember, this is 1790s, right? And he's talking about 1688 or any other period. So maybe like 100 years ago or so, has no more right to dispose of the people of the present day or to bind control of them in any shape, whatever, then the parliament of the present day had to dispose, bind, or control. So he's saying people in the 16, let me just write it over here, 1688, right? These people are in the past. They don't have, right? And these guys, right? So these people and these people have equal rights in their own times, right? That's all he's saying. You are living in 1790s or 1791 actually, right? And 1688, that was a time in the past, okay? So they don't have more right to dispose of than any people in the present day, okay? Okay, or control those who are to live 100 years hence, okay? So people in 100, 1,000 years hence. So nobody can control anybody in the future. That's what he's saying. Okay, so let's not worry about the past or even of the future. Okay, every generation is and must be competent to all the purposes which its occasion require. Right. So every generation to think for itself. Don't just depend on the past or the future. Okay, it is the living and not the dead. This is super important. Living and not the dead. That are to be accommodated, which means you need to care about those people first. Okay, so clearly he's saying whatever the situation is right now, you need to work on it. This is a much simpler passage written by this person than what he's written, right? He's like going on into parents and talking about like universal kingdom and stuff like that. This one is more, this guy looks to be more pragmatic, right? Whatever's happening now, let's face it. Maybe he doesn't have much wealth, right? Maybe the earlier guy has some wealth. So those are probably their motives, right? These people who wrote such fancy languages probably were educated and had some wealth. And a lot of it. Okay, so when man ceases to be his power and his wants seized them. So again, now this guy is also going round the circle, right? Like, okay, now he's giving some arguments of the same type, right? Live now, the person who's dead is gone. His wants, his power cease and have no longer any participation in the concerns of this world. He has no longer any authority either, okay, in directing who are his governors, and how his government should be organized and how it's administered. Anytime you see these ellipses, right, like, so just you can ignore them, right? It's just a full stop, okay, a period over here. Now, let's go ahead and see. So far, what he's saying is, if you're in the present, you are most responsible for the present time. You can do whatever you want. The past and the present don't have any binding on the future. Okay, so next paragraph over here. And once again, you should be reading this fast and putting these notes in your mind. Those who have quitted the world and those who are not yet arrived at it, so those who have died and are unborn, are as remote from each other as the utmost stretch of. Wow. Again, he's saying the same deal, right? We don't care about them. What possible obligation can exist between them? What rule or principle? Now, this is anytime you see a what with a question mark, that's a rhetoric, right? He's saying whenever you say a what over here, it means there is no obligation. There's no obligation that exists between them, or no rule exists between them. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Okay, and who never can meet. So they can never meet in this world. Okay, they can never control each other till the end of time. That's all he's saying. So which means this whole paragraph is just a huge waste of time for people in the 21st century. It's just saying that these people are not our biggest concern. Okay, the circumstances, and thankfully it's finished over here. So the circumstances of the world are continually changing. Right now, this ending of the paragraph looks like it's interesting. The circumstances of the world are continually changing, which is for sure, right? And the opinions of men change also. So things are changing, right? And as government is for the living and not for the dead, it is the living only that has any right in it. So the current situation is keeping on going on changing, and then the people who are living in it, they will also, their opinions will change, and so the state should probably also change. Let's see what he's saying next. Okay, that which may be thought right and found convenient in one age may be found wrong and convenient in another. In such cases, who's to decide the living or the dead? So he's never talked anything about the state. It could be about anything, right? It could be about slavery. It could be about women's rights. It could be about the state. It could be about the internet connection. Whatever you want to talk about it, this statement can be true for anything. But let's see how this applies to the other place. Is the most important thing is that the person before, he's talking about the state, but the biggest argument he's making is that who are we to change it, because we are just a piece, a slice in the whole continuum of the past, present, and the future. While this person is saying, if you might want to believe whichever one, but you need to understand both the points of view, right? The circumstances are changing, the opinions change, and people who are living in it, they are the most responsible, because the past and the present, they're not even connected, they're not even existing anymore, right? So these are the 2 points of views. Okay, now let's go ahead and answer the questions here. Okay, so in passage 1, Burke indicates that a contract between a person and society differs from other contracts, right? Passage 1, so the contract between a person and a society. So what you can do right now, pause the video, think about it for a second, and then see if you can answer it. And after you answer it, actually literally put it down in the comments, right? Remember, if you output this information, it's going to be much more beneficial to you, right? Just don't put it in your head, type it down in the comments, or just email it back to me, okay? So what's going on over here is indicates a contract between a person and a society differs. Why does it differ, right? So here it is. And this is literally like, you're gonna have pages, but this is the PDF file I'm looking, right? So you need to go back and forth. But remember, think about it, what you're talking about. Contract between a person and society differs from other contracts. Remember those other contracts we talked about, those mortgage contracts which I made up, or what he's talking about, those trade contracts. So let's go over there. He's saying a contract between a person and society, which means that main state society, right, state contract is different. Like this thing, right, this state is above this. Why is that, right? So so here it is, right? Society is indeed a contract, but the state, etc., 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 etc. It may be looked on it, but it's not a partnership in things subservient, right? It is a partnership in all science, right? All of these ideas over here, right? So you can look at the answer over here, and let's try to understand brevity and prominence, right? So the most important thing is that it's a contract over here that's talking about this particular contract is not to be taken up for little temporary interest, right? Which means it's permanent. It cannot be like a 1-year contract or 2-year contract, right? And cannot be dissolved. So it's an important contract, and it should be looked on with reference, right? That's important. While the other contracts are very not as important to him. So brevity and prominence. Brevity, never talked about it. Let's cancel it. Okay, super easy. Complexity and rigidity. Rigidity, never talked about it. So as always, the way I do it is I always try to cancel out the 2 easier ones. And then there are 2 slightly confusing ones. So the easier ones are here. And if you still haven't answered the question, pause the video, think about it, think about which of these might be true, okay? And precision and usefulness. Precision, never talked about it. Seriousness, yes, did talk about it a little bit. And permanence, for sure. This is the most important piece, right? Permanence, for sure. That's why D is the correct answer, okay? Let's move on to the next one. Here, as used in line 4, state mostly refers to what? So line 4 over here, we have consecrated the state. So after reading all of this, we realize it has to do with this wealth kind of thing, this government. Of course, it's talking about the French Revolution, right? You need to be aware of the basic history, right? Be aware of history from maybe, you can start from like 1776 onwards till maybe 1940s. Okay, this part of history, like the 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s, that part of history, if you don't have the history or summary, just get in touch with me. I'll give you the summary of that history, okay? You just need to know, most of you will know it, but for some people who are outside of the US and my students, right, get in touch with me and I'll show you, but most of you are in the US, so you know what the history is about, okay? What that history is about. So state is style of living, maybe. Position in life, no. Temporary condition, no. A political entity, for sure, right? That makes complete sense, right? It's the government that they're talking about. It could be style of living, but not as much, right? They're more about how to govern something, how the state is. Okay, so style of living is also canceled out. Okay, crossed out. So as used in line 22, low most nearly means. So let's go to line 22 over here. Low concern, right? So let's read the sentence real quick. The state ought not to be considered as nothing. Okay, this which means double negatives. So you can just kind of cancel it. The state ought to be considered better than a partnership agreement. Okay, in terms of trade, all of these things, and some other such low concern. So again, this was low and this was the higher concern, right? So let's see. So it clearly, like, try to, without even thinking about the answer, like, try to think about it. What does it mean? It means that this is slightly unimportant. The state is more kind of like more important over here, right? So that's what it's saying. Most nearly means petty, yes, most probably. Weak, no, of course not. Right? Inadequate, no. And depleted, which means it doesn't have much money or energy, no. So this one is easy. It's petty. If you don't understand the meaning of this word, get back to me. I've got a whole list of vocab words for you. I've got about 1,100 words that I can send you, and then you can work off of them. Okay. It can be reasonable. It can most reasonably inferred from passage 2 that Paine views historical precedents as. Okay, so let's think about this passage here. It can most reasonably be inferred from passage 2 that Paine views. So this is passage 2 over here. And what are the historical precedents? Means that what has happened in the past, right? Right over here, he's saying that all of these ideas, right? They are not important, right? The people in the past are gone, right? They don't have much importance, right? When a man ceases to be, his power and all of these ideas, his wants, cease, and therefore he has no authority in directing who shall be his governors, right? So let's try to understand. Generally helpful to those who want to change society. Historical precedents, not really, right? They could be harmful as well. Surprisingly difficult for many people to comprehend, not really. Frequently responsible for human progress. Historical precedents are frequently responsible for human progress, but he never mentioned it. Paine never really mentioned it. Largely irrelevant to current political decisions. So you can see the questions are easy and the answers are easy if you can just understand that one underlying theme, right? The one underlying theme that both of these guys are talking about. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. All right, so in this question, how would Payne most likely respond to Burke's statement in 30 through 34? So let's look at what his statement is as 30 through 34. As the ends of such partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but also between those who are living, dead, and unborn. So this situation, right? Like, what is he talking about? This past, present, and future. So clearly, you know now, by now, right? What Mr. Burke is saying is that the present is just a piece of it, and they shouldn't interfere too much with because the whole continuum of the universal kingdom is involved. While um, um, Mr. Payne says over here that the like what the present is the most important, right? So he would assert the notion of a partnership is less plausible. No, right? He would argue that there are no politically meaningful links between the dead, the living, and the unborn. Very likely, right? That's what the other guy is saying. That's what Burke is saying right there. These people should be involved, right? Even though they don't exist. He's saying like, guys, they don't exist. They don't. The dead and the unborn don't exist right now. So there's no possibility of a meaningful link, right? Most probably, this is the correct answer. He would. Question the possibility that significant changes to the political system could be accomplished. That's not his point, and he would point out that we cannot know about the judgments of the dead. This is also incorrect. So that's why B is your correct answer here. Okay, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? And I think we've seen this before here, right? Where he's actually talking about a lot of pieces over here, right? So let's actually look at the answers here. 41 through 43, every, right over here, 41 through 43, every age. Not really. He's not really talking about that piece where there's no connection between them, right? So that's gone. We have to find that point where he's actually saying there's no real connection between these people. Okay, 43 to 45. The vanity and presumption of governing beyond the grace is, so there's still not this one. Okay, 56 through 58. Let's see, 56 to 58 is when a man ceases to be his power and his wand cease with him, and having no longer any participation, he has no longer any authority, right? So that could be, right, why the past shouldn't be important, right? But remember, there's the future as well. So maybe this is true, okay? Let's look at 61 through 70, 67 through 72. What possible obligation can exist between them? Okay, between whom? Right? Those who have quitted the world and those who have not arrived. So this looks like it, right? What rule? So again, this is the rhetoric, right? No possible obligation exists between them. No rule can be laid down. That these are non-entities out of existence, right? And then, as you can see, this one is the correct answer. And as you can see, this could have been, but you can easily, and some of you might be pretty good at this. You might already see this is incorrect, and D is your correct answer, right? Let's go to 38 here. Which choice best describes how Burke, the first guy, would have reacted to Payne's remark in the final paragraph of passage 2? So let's go to passage 2. And again, you got to keep moving forward and backward. And I would say print this out and try it again by yourself, right? The same passage, just try it out by yourself, right? So the last paragraph, like, and we actually drew a kind of like a small diagram over here. The circumstances of the world are continually changing. The opinions of men. So no need to read all of this during your test, right? What they're saying is the situation is changing, people's opinions are changing, and so the government, the political system could and should change, right? Just go with the flow, basically. So how can Burke say it, right? Is he going to approve it? Clearly not, right? Because the passages are opposing each other. With resignation, not really, which means like he gives into it. No, he'll have some opinions, right? He'll clearly have some opinions. With skepticism, maybe, right? With disapproval, maybe, right? So let's see which one of these is better. Again, we crossed out the two obviously incorrect ones. Because Payne does not substantiate his claim with examples of government change for the better. Sure, yeah, maybe, right? He doesn't really, Payne is just talking. He's not really given any examples. He's saying the president should change it, but what's the proof that it's better, right? So yeah, maybe. But look at this second one with disapproval, because this changing conditions are insufficient justification for changing the form of government. This looks like it, because what Payne is saying really is that you can change the government. The biggest thing is if the changing conditions if the conditions change, then you can change the government, right? That's his biggest thing. He's not saying you should change the government if anything else happens, right? He shouldn't change the government if, for instance, people remain poor. You shouldn't change the government. He's never saying that. He's just saying that if the conditions due to time are changing, right, then only you should change the government, because as the conditions change, the government should change. So that's why this is his main idea, and so that's just an insufficient justification. There should be a stronger justification. Okay, so that's why this is cancelled out, and then D is the correct answer. Okay, which choice provides the best evidence to the previous question, right? So let's see now. Let's go ahead and see. So basically, he's saying the changing conditions are not sufficient enough, right? You shouldn't mess with them, even though the conditions are changing. That's okay. So let's see, to avoid, so let's go to 1 and see. So what does passage 1 through 4, like lines 1 through 4 say? To avoid the evils of inconstancy, etc., right? We have consecrated the state. That's nothing. That's totally irrelevant. He's just saying you should make the state sacred, right? So that's why this is gone. 7 through 9. Again, you need to find out that particular point, which is saying that the changing conditions are insufficient, right? 7 through 9, what is he saying? He should never dream of reforming it, right? Again, this is nothing about changing conditions, like totally easily crossed out. Okay, it's 27 through 29 and 34 to 38. So 27 through 29, let's see what it's talking about. It's talking about this contract thing. Remember that contract, the mortgage, and all of the other trading stuff, right? It's an important reverent contract, right? It's above everything else, all of this rhetoric over here, right? So probably not that one either, okay? And which leaves us with the last one, and let's check it out actually. So 34 through 38 is right over here. The municipal corporations of that universal kingdom, all of this universal kingdom of the living, the past, the future, right, are not at cannot and should not change any of this, right, of their subordinate community to dissolve it at all, right? So this is exactly what he's talking about, right? Not the most precise evidence, but still it's better than almost everything else that is, right? So sometimes you might just want to eliminate it. The choices might be easy, and then you can cross them out. Okay, let's talk about this passage real quick. This is talking about the relationship. Really, passage 2 is opposing passage 1, right? So you can clearly see that it's challenging the primary argument of passage 1. So it's a very big maybe. The passage 2 advocates an alternative approach. No. Further evidence, clearly not. Exemplifies an attitude. No. So this is the only one which is actually challenging it and not even providing an alternative approach. So that's why 40 is correct. And then the last one, the main purpose of both passages is to suggest a way, and remember the last question could be a slightly challenging, suggest a way to resolve a particular political struggle. Maybe there was a struggle, the French Revolution, and maybe the struggle could have bled into the UK and some other countries. So maybe, but let's see what else we've got. Discuss the relationship between people and their government. Yes, big maybe, right? Why? Because in the first one, he's talking about over here, like, people are kind of like just pieces. They're kind of robots, and you should consider the state to be very sacred, right? That part is right over here. While over the other piece over here, Mr. Payne is saying is that people have complete control. They should totally change it. Nothing is sacred. You can change it whichever way you want, right? And have your change. So this is a very big maybe. Okay. Evaluate the consequences of rapid political change. Nothing is being talked about the consequences. Describe the duties that governments, not at all, right? So out of these two, are they showing you how to resolve a particular political struggle? Not really. Nothing is talked about being able to resolve, especially the first guy. He's not even talking about any resolution, right? So that's why this is gone. And so B is your correct answer. So with that, we conclude this paired passage. Once again, watch this whole video at a faster speed and try to solve it by yourself. This passage is from the practice test number 4. Okay, so good luck with it, and post your answers in the comments. Remember, pause after every video and post the comments. Okay, so good luck with your test, and I'll post another video very soon.